Good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to Alka Rhea Show. Thank you so much for tuning in for today's show, and always for tuning in because it's about your success. And Rhea and we want to really help you to unfold the journey where you are today and how you're going to get to where you want to be. So Rhea, she talks about real estate and I talk about the mindset. So together, her and I, we bridge the gap where you reach into your success. But today's conversation, Rhea will be heading so. But before I do bring her on, I want to introduce ourselves. My name is Alka.
My name is Rhea, and
And welcome
welcome to
to our
our show.
show. Rhea, gonna pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Alka. And today is a topic from the book of Wealth Without Cash from Pace Morby, and I'm going to be continuing and sharing my screen. So last week, we talked about exit strategies to make money. And to recap, there were 6 from the book: wrap exit strategy, lease option, exit strategy, subtail exit strategy, innovation agreements, traditional rental exit strategy, group homes exit strategy, and vacation rental exit strategy. Today, I will be talking about the wrap exit strategy. So, what is wrap exit strategy? Wrap exit strategy is also known as a seller on a wrap. So if just think about wrap, if you have a sandwich, you are wrapping the sandwich so that you can eat it somewhere else. So that's basically what a wrap is. Just think of it like a sandwich with a wrap. Amazing way to get into the business, according to Pace, with no money, right? Because not all of us have money, have the wherewithal. So according to Pace, the wrap exit strategy is a great way to start the business with no money, out of your own pocket, out of my own pocket. And we'll understand that in a few minutes from now. I will expound more on it. So Pace said, if I can take a home subject to or seller finance or a hybrid model. Now, subject to seller finance hybrid model, we've discussed about seller finance earlier. Seller finance is where there is no mortgage. It's owned by the seller outright. That's a seller finance. Subject to if there is a bank mortgage. And hybrid, meaning it's just a combination of several things. It could be seller finance and subject to. So again, if I can take a home subject to seller finance or hybrid model, an agreement for sale, right? I can sell those as a wrap. So if we have a seller finance hybrid model or a subject to, we get the agreement form for the sale, and then we can use this wrap exit strategy. However, according to Pace, I cannot use a wrap for, so this is the things that we cannot use a wrap. If it's a lease option or an innovation agreement or a note. So we cannot use a wrap if there's a lease, it's a lease option, an innovation agreement, or a note because I do not own the property. So you need to own the property to do a wrap. I can only wrap a home when I own the home. Okay, so again, you cannot do a wrap if there's a lease option involved in it, an innovation agreement, or a note. Example, I find a seller who agrees to a $210,000 purchase price of his home. He wants a $5,000 down payment. Now, the rest is to be paid over 30 years with 3% interest. Again, the purchase price is $210,000. The down payment is only $5,000. And the best thing is the owner is willing to do a 30 years with 3% interest for the remaining money. So I stepped in with a purchase agreement that reiterates this information and allows me to assign the home to someone else. Remember, this word is very important, assign, because with a wrap exit, you remember you don't have a lot of money, or I don't have a lot of money, so I am not the one buying it. So I need it to be assigned. So this word assign the property to someone else. So this has to be in the clause when we do the purchase sales agreement. That someone else is the buyer. So when you're doing a wrap exit, I am not the buyer, I'm the sandwich. The buyer is another person. That's why you can do it with no little money down on your part. So next, what we need is the purchase agreement. So we find a seller, we found a buyer, we are the middle, we are the sandwich, right? Now what we need to do is the purchase agreement form. So this should give me, right, 30 to 90 days to find a buyer. Okay, if we found a house by seller financing and then I need to find a buyer, the purchase agreement should have 30 to 90 days clause in it to find a buyer, assuming I am in a position where I cannot maintain the home or I don't want the hassle for this particular deal. So it's kind of just finding, it's like finding a home and you want to make money right away and then find a buyer so that you can make money right away. And you have 30 to 90 days. That needs to be in the form. You have 30 to 90 days to find the buyer. So what this means for you and I is that we need to have a buyer pool. We need to have a buyer's list in hand. Because if one buyer, so that when the 30, 90 days, that is so fast. So you need to have a buyer's list already in hand. So when you have a buyer's list, you can go, and who are the buyer's list? That would be investors. That would be first-time home buyers who are now ready to become investors. So you can go through each one of them if they're interested in purchasing the home. So you can close on it right away. So this is now called a wrap buyer. Remember the sandwich? You are wrapping it. You are not the buyer, but you are wrapping it with another buyer. This is called a wrap buyer. A penalty box buyer is also what it's known for. So what is penalty box buyer? Penalty box buyer is often someone who can't apply for a normal loan. This is not the traditional mortgage. Okay, this is a unique way of buying property. So penalty box buyer is when someone who can't apply for a normal loan. So what that means is that banks usually denies about 40%. They deny, right, the banks, the traditional mortgage, they deny 40%. So those 40%, those who are creative can do a wrap exit mortgage. Or they are an investor who is using the structures to limit their taxes. Now, this buyer will purchase the home for, again, let's say $265,000 with 20% down payment and 6 to 9% interest for 40 years. Because this is not the traditional method of buying properties. You can do 40 years, you can do X amount of interest payment, you can do an X amount of down payment. So it depends on your creativity and what you and the seller agreed. Now, to clarify, I am wrapping the initial terms with my own terms. You see that? Your own terms, not the bank's terms, but your own terms. It's the same thing as getting a gift, rewrapping it, and regifting it. I cover their terms, meaning the seller's terms, with your terms, and make money on the difference. The best part about this wrap exit, this type of deal, is that I can make money in 3 different ways. So when we are doing a wrap exit, we can make money in 3 different ways. How? Let's look further. So according to Pace, 3 different ways. The first way is I can make money right away because I make $15,000 Now, this is just an arbitrary number, okay? Depends on what the seller and what you agreed and what you can sell it for. So I can make money right away because I make 15,000 from the buyer's down payment. Remember, I am not the buyer, I'm just the sandwich. The buyer is the other third person. As they are paying me 20,000 and I'm only paying 5,000 to the seller. So how did we come up with 15? So for example, the seller is only asking 5,000 down payment, DP down payment, and the buyer, you told the buyer you need a 20,000 down payment. So the difference, 15,000, is money. This is now your money that you pocket. Okay, this is the first way to make money. And this is just the down payment on the exit, the wrap exit. Now, second way I make money, you make money, we make money is by financing the home. Now, we become the bank by financing the home. Then I make money on higher interest rates. Now, again, earlier I said this is now your own terms, what you and the seller agreed. And then now you have the buyer, and now you talk to the buyer and you negotiate with a buyer. And this is where the interest rate, the second way that you can make money is the interest rate that you are going to charge the buyer. So for example, if you talk to the seller and the seller agreed a 3% interest, okay, and you have the buyer and you tell the buyer that the interest is 9%, so that 6% is now money on you. This is what you get, the 6% difference. That's your money. The seller's interest rate is 3%. The buyer's interest rate is 6.5 to 9%. Okay, in this situation is 9%. 6% is the money you get. After down payments, the buyer owes me 245,000 and I owe the seller 205,000. Again, to get an example, so the seller is asking 245,000. The buyer is putting down 205,000. The 40,000, that's the money you made. That's the equity now that you made. And according to Pace, here's the best part. I can still make monthly cash flow even though I no longer own the money. All this money goes through the servicing company, and the servicing company is paying both me, the sandwich, and the original seller. Do you get that? So there's three ways, right? First is the down payment. Whether it's 15,000 down payment, you make 15,000 down payment because why? The 5,000 is the asking of the seller, and then you are asking from the buyer 20,000. Remember that? That's the down payment. The other one would be the interest, right? So if the seller is asking for 3% and you told the buyer 9%, the 6% is on you. And now the third one is this cash flow. You can still get monthly cash flow even though you no longer own the money. And all this, how are you going to be paid? You are getting paid from the servicing company. That's like the title company. So it's paying the seller and you. The money is coming from the buyer. Now, according to Pace, here's the favorite part of a wrap deal compared to a typical rental. So if something breaks, now we are doing the wrap, okay? You have to put yourself that you're doing the wrap. You're the middle. You're not the seller. You're not the buyer. You're the middleman. So comparing the wrap to a typical rental, if something breaks, I am not the owner or the landlord. Remember, we are not the landlord. The landlord is the buyer. I am a lender, so I don't get involved. So if something breaks, we are not being called. The buyer gets called. All I need to do is to collect checks from the servicing company. So we still get paid, right? When the buyer owns the money, when the buyer owns the house, the original seller gets paid, and we also get paid from the monthly rent. And we are getting paid from the servicing company. Next, I make money in the upfront costs as a monthly interest. We talked about the interest earlier. 3% from the seller, 9% from the buyer, so we get the 6%. And with a built-in equity, all for setting up the deal. This was the example of the 245,000, right, that the buyer is willing to buy, and then the seller is only asking 245,000. So that means we have the 40,000 equity. This is what it's saying. We have the built-in equity for setting up the deal. Now, this is, again, to sum it up, what is a seller wrap deal? Wrap exit strategy, wrap around mortgage. The seller, remember, the seller needs to own the home 100% to be able to do this. So the seller keeps the existing mortgage on the home, or they have, so either 100% seller owned, or the seller, they have their mortgage, their own mortgage, and they still have to keep it. So the seller keeps the existing mortgage on the home. They offer seller financing to help the buyer complete the purchase, and then wraps the buyer's new loan over the existing mortgage like a sandwich. So there's something in the middle, and we are in the middle. The pros and cons of a wraparound mortgage. Advantages of a wraparound mortgage. Now, benefits for the buyers, the other end, the investors, or people who cannot qualify for a traditional normal loan. It's easier to qualify. Remember, 40% of people gets denied by the bank. So these people can do wraparound mortgage. Lower closing costs, because now the banks have a lot of closing fees, okay? But since you're not doing the bank, you have lower closing costs. Now the benefits for the sellers, the person that owns the home, they can sell their home quickly, right? Because if you go through the bank, it takes several, days and months for the bank. They have standards, they have processes. Continuous income. Benefit for the seller. They still get income. What? How? Because the buyer, right, is renting it out, and you get paid monthly. And the person that's doing it, for example, I'm doing the wrap exit, I still get paid too. And then the loan is also secured by the home. So you are still protected because you still have the home under your name. Now, disadvantages of a wrap-around mortgage. So if there's an advantage, there's also a disadvantage. And I'd like to know what the disadvantage, because I can take the advantage, but sometimes people cannot take the disadvantage. So what are the risks for the buyers? There's also risk for the sellers. Risk for the buyers, higher interest rate. Remember the 3% of the seller? And now as a buyer, you are paying 9%. Why is that higher interest? Because the middle, right? The middle, the sandwich is making that difference, 6%. Why? Because he did a lot of work. He found the seller and he found the buyer and he put them together. So that's why he gets the 6%. So the risk for the buyer, higher interest rate. Seller may not pay the mortgage. I will tell you later on how to go about this when the seller stops paying the mortgage, because now it goes back to the bank and we need to protect us. Because we just paid them, the down payment, we're paying that interest, we're paying monthly mortgage, and now the seller just stops paying. That means the property can go back to the bank. But there is a solution to this. Now, the risk for the buyers, loan doesn't build credit. Why? Even though you are paying the monthly payments on this property, the home, right, the home is still under the seller. So you're not building, you're not showing good credit score because it's shown on the seller because it is still under the seller's name. The mortgage is still under the seller. Risk for the sellers. The loan is not assumable, meaning the buyer, right, is not responsible for it. You are still responsible for it. Risk of non-buyer non-payment. So the buyer can stop payment. And now what happens if the buyer can stops payment? Then you, as a seller, would have to take over. Now, alternatives to a wraparound mortgage. FHA loan, this is true in America. These are all just different types of loan. FHA loans, again, why it's an alternative? Because they offer as low as 3.5% for first-time home buyers or buyers with lower credit scores. USDA loans, they're good for low-income borrowers. They do not require down payment. VA loans, if you serve the government here in the USA, then they give you a low or sometimes even no down payment. Rent-to-own agreements, and home equity, which is using your line of credit. Now, these are just frequently asked questions about wrap-around mortgage. How does a wrap-around mortgage differ from a traditional mortgage? Now, like I said earlier, so traditional mortgage and a wrap-around mortgage. Traditional mortgage use a bank, okay? The wraparound mortgage, we use the seller. That's one of the different things. Now, when we pay to the seller instead of the bank. Okay, we pay to the seller. Now, as payments are made to the seller pays the existing mortgage and pockets the difference as profit on the sale of their home. So, the seller pays the amount from the wrap minus the mortgage from the bank. The difference is pocketed from the seller. That means that the seller gets more money. Because why? Because the buyer is paying for the mortgage from the bank and you gave the amount, a certain amount to the buyer. So that difference is pocketed by the seller. Now, how long does it take to close a transaction involving a wraparound mortgage? It's very easy. Close within a few days. Now, who holds the title in a wraparound mortgage? The title is either held by the seller or the buyer. So if the property is not paid for by the buyer, you have to hold. The seller has to hold it. Once the buyer pays off the loan, then the buyer will hold the title. What happens if the seller defaults on the primary mortgage in a wraparound arrangement? Again, if you're the buyer, right, you're paying monthly, but then the seller do not pay the bank, this is now the exit. This is what I said earlier. When we do the purchase sale agreement form, we need a clause that we can pay the bank lender directly. So in the event that the seller does not pay, we can pay the bank directly. As the buyer, we can go to the bank and say, hey, Mr. Banker, this is the payment for this particular property. So that is all for the wrap exit strategy. I hope you learned something from this wrap exit strategy because we can make in three ways to make money. Okay, so you can just review to see how we can make money. 3 ways on this wrap exit strategy. So stay tuned for more Alka and Rhea Show for the next exit strategy that I'll be sharing with you from the book of Pace Morby. All right.
Yes, Rhea, wow, that was great information. Yes, and I took a ton of notes. I hope everybody else took a ton of notes as well. Rhea, you talked about the 40%. That's high, right? When you said people, when they apply, they get denied from the bank, right? They get denied from the bank. So if that is the case, and that's a very high percentage, what could be the solution for individuals who are applying but they get denied is it based off of their credit score? What would it be based off? And what could be the solution
Well,
from that?
from my experience, right, from buying properties, usually the
Yeah.
bank has a check boxes and you got to fit in their check boxes. So what does the bank ask from me if I buy property? So the bank asks for our W-2. So W-2 means you have a stable job employment. So they want to make sure that you as their creditor, right, that you're borrowing money, that you have the ability to pay the bank every month. So how can they be assured is that you have a stable income. So what they would require is a proof of that income, which is in the form of, here in America, it's a W-2 form. And then the bank would also ask the 3 months of recent, your income for the last 3 months. Because yes, you have W-2, but that means, it was like several months ago. So they, aside
Right.
from the W-2, the bank would ask your current income from 3 months before. So if we're in April, they would ask for, if you have the page stub in April, they would ask for March or February. If you don't have the April, then they would go back for January, February, March. So a lot of times they look at credit score, they look at your stable ability to pay them monthly, so your job income, and then the risk, your debt limit, debt to credit limit, the credit ratio. So if you have a lot of debt, your ability to pay the off that debt. So if you have a lot of debt, they may have to think twice how you can repay them back, because then if you have a lot of debt, how can you pay the bank? So there's a lot of criterias. Those are just some of the criterias that the bank would look at, but those three that I just mentioned are heavily looked upon by the bank
Mm-hmm.
based on my
Hmm.
experience.
Right. And so why is it so high? Why is it 40%? Does
Because
it often vary? Yeah.
I mean, it's more than half, right? Because they do not meet those, and that's why there's this creative financing, right? The wrap exit strategy is one of the ways where you can circumvent. You don't have to do the traditional mortgage. In America, like I mentioned before, there's that, if you're a VA, if you're serve the government, they have the veterans, VA loans. There's the FHA loan that would only require for 3% down payment. It's geared towards low income um, community, low income group.
Oh, the FHA?
Yes, the FHA, the VA loans, the USDA loans, the ones that I just mentioned too in the slide earlier.
Mm-hmm.
Those are alternative ways of buying properties, not the traditional bank mortgage route. Because like you said,
Right.
40% gets denied. A lot of them gets denied.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about, because I'm curious to know.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So say you talked about individuals applying who want to buy a property would have no money. So let's talk about, as I'm curious, and as audience also probably is curious to know, if you, so the banks look at the A type banks, right? Because you have the A, the B type. So the A type are the banks,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if the banks are very strict now, they get more strict now when you're applying. They want, like you said, they want to see your credit score. They want to see your income.
Mm-hmm.
So then they want to be assured when they are providing you or giving you the loan, the mortgage, can you pay it back? So I absolutely agree with that. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm also curious to know that, say, for example, your income, you can provide, your income is good, you have that stable income, like I said, but somewhere you are in debt, or just walk me through, or walk us through the steps that if you are in debt, that how does that work? How does that work? Just you know
I mean, people here in America, we have debt, right? We run on credit, but you have to show proof that you're paying your credit, right? And that's why we have credit bureaus. That's
Yeah,
why it would reflect the credit score is like our card,
it's a
right?
card.
Because
Yeah.
it's like our card, right? It shows the report card of how good we are in paying our debt. everybody here who lives in America, I mean, there's only very few that deals with cash, but a lot of times we deal with credit because it builds up our credit history, it builds up our credit score. So by having a lot of debt, as long as you're paying them every month, let's say for example, my tenants, right? They want to buy properties. I just recently had a tenant who is graduating and wants to buy a property now of his own because now he's an attending. The banker sent me a form. The form asked, how many months did this person rented from you? Did this person paid on time?
Mm,
If not paid on time, how long has he been delinquent?
yeah.
So that means that even when you're using your credit card, right, those companies that you purchase, they will report to the credit bureau that yes, this person paid on time. Yes, this person has been delinquent. So if you paid on time, even though you have a lot of credit, as long as you're paying on time, right, then there won't be any problem because you are showing to the bank that you are responsible, you're a responsible person, you're a responsible citizen, that you will pay them
Mm-hmm.
if they lend you the money, because now your track record shows that you've been paying all these other creditors, these debtors, right, every month
Mm-hmm.
without any miss. So even when you are in debt, as long as you're showing proof that you are paying every month your creditor, then you are able to qualify for a loan. The interest may be different because now the bank would look, oh, you're only making an X amount of money. Let's say for example you're only making 100,000, and the bank would not let you borrow $1 million, because why? That $1 million is, let's say 30,000 per month of mortgage. Of course the bank would not lend you that 1 million because you're only making 100,000. So the
Right.
bank would lend you in proportion to what you bring in proportion to your monthly income, right? So the bank
Right.
may lend you 50,000, and then the rest of it will be coming from your own down payment. So what that means is that you cannot afford to buy a $1 million home. You can afford to buy 100,000 home or 150,000 home, but that means you have to put more down payment just so you can make the monthly principal and interest affordable on your part. Because if you're making 100,000, that means that you're probably bringing home, 5, 6,000 per month. That means that you probably should have a mortgage of around 2,000 or less. So either you put more money down payment to afford 150,000 home, or you stick to a lower price tag of a home, which is 100,000 or less.
Mm-hmm. And what is the advantage of, is there an advantage in any way to put more down payment? Do people put more down payment? What is the,
So the advantage is that, especially right now, if you have the wherewithal, if you have the money, if you have the money to put the down payment, I would recommend it. Why? Unless, I mean, if you're just storing it in the bank, yes, put a lot of, put more than the down payment. When I buy properties, I put 20% down payment, or sometimes even more, just to make the numbers. The cash flow is very important, right? But if
Mhm.
you're if for example it's just a not an investor, it's just a primary home owner, right, the interest rate it will be high. So if you have just money sitting in the bank, and the interest rate right now is 6-7%, right, you put more money down as a down payment, because then it makes it more affordable on the monthly principal and interest. If you put more down payment, it's lesser money out of your pocket. You can
Right.
afford the principal and interest payment. That's the advantage of putting a more down payment. Like if you don't know what to do with your money, then yeah, just put more money towards the down payment,
Right. Okay.
because
Because
otherwise
then
it's a higher principal and interest every month, and for 30 years it's really very heavy.
it
Because
is.
especially when you don't know if you're going to be laid off in few years from
Mm-hmm.
now, or if you're going to
Mm-hmm.
change jobs in a few years from now. It's always good that the principal and interest payment is affordable, so that you have other uses of your money, to go out, to pay for car loans, to pay for groceries, to help your parents. There's more things that your money can do, instead of just 80% all going to your mortgage. That's really very heavy, because now you only have 20% discretionary use for for groceries. So you can't live a life with just 20% left over. So
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right.
more down,
Okay.
the better, if you don't know what to do with it.
Okay. So put more on the down payment.
Yes, at this point, it depends on
It
everybody's.
depends. Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Amazing. Amazing, amazing tips, Ria. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for each and every one for tuning in today. Just amazing conversation. But I hope all of you took a ton of notes, like I took a ton of notes, and very well. Just really amazing tip. But we have come to the end of another amazing show. Thank you so much for tuning in and staying here with us. Make the rest of the day the best of your day. And we will see you at the same time, same place tomorrow morning. Thanks, Ria.
Thank you, Alka.
All right.
Next
See you
week.
then.
Okay,
Yeah.
bye
Bye.
bye.
Bye.